Hadirin yang kami hormati, selamat pagi dan selamat datang di Savoy Homan Bidakara Hotel Bandung, Indonesia. Pada hari ini Selasa 21 Januari 2014, kita akan bersama-sama mengikuti hari kedua dan upacara pembukaan di APAN 37 Meeting. Acara ini diselenggarakan oleh Asia Pacific Advanced Network APAN dan bekerjasama dengan Institut Teknologi Bandung. Acara ini diselenggarakan sejak kemarin, hari Senin tanggal 20 Januari 2014 hingga 24 Januari 2014. Good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Savoy Homan Bidakara Hotel Bandung, Indonesia. Today, Tuesday, 21st of January 2014, we are very grateful to welcome you to the second day of the Asia Pacific Advanced Network 37 meeting. This event is organized by Asia Pacific Advanced Network with collaboration with local committee Institut Teknologi Bandung. The APAN 37 meeting held from 20 to 24 January 2014. Baik, hadirin yang kami hormati, sebagai acara pertama, marilah kita ikuti laporan Ketua Panitia di APAN 37 meeting. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, our first agenda for today is welcoming remarks from Chairman of the APAN 37 Meeting Local Committee. Please welcome Mr. Basuki Suhardiman.
Good morning, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to APAN 37 in Bandung. This is the first time APAN meeting in Indonesia. We held in Bandung right now. We held in this big hotel we call the Savoy Homan Hotel. This is one of our heritage hotel in Bandung because in 1955 there is an Asia Africa conference held by our first president, Dr. Soekarno. And then from this Asia Africa conference, we in Indonesia have a non-block country, and with this spirit, we hope that in the first APAN meeting in Bandung, we can have a collaboration more closely among the countries, because right now more than 30 delegates from the Asia Pacific, from the Europe, even from the Latin America come to Bandung, and we as a local committee we apologize if there is something problem with our services, our network, something, and we hope that you can enjoy the stay in Bandung, enjoy the conference. Then we thank to keynote speaker, Dr. Ari Santoso from the Ministry of Education, he's head of ICT Center, the Ministry of Education, and he had for the Jaringan National Education Network, and Dr. Ari Santoso is head of the Pustekom. Pustekom is the ICT Center, and we by the 2015 or 16, we will connect more than 200,000 schools in Indonesia, and 200,000 schools in Indonesia will connect to the inherent, because inherent as a backbone for the national backbone in Indonesia for the education. Inherent is we call the Indonesian Higher Education Research Network. And we hope this year, 2014, we will try to have a dark fiber around Java with the concept of IRU, indivisible right use. We hope that in this, we will start this year. Maybe we hope that this March we have held the dark fiber. And thank you for Professor Hubert from the UNESCO come, and then we have the keynote speaker from him for the UNESCO and its activity. And thank you again to the master in the next Thursday. We have the master class. What this is collaboration with UNESCO and APAN and sorry. Okay. Thank you for all the communication. We hope that you can enjoy and stay in Bandung and surround Bandung because so many nice you can see if you have a time. We in Bandung there is one volcano, active volcano called the Tambukan Brau. It's not far from here. It's around 25 kilometers. If you have time, you can saw our volcano. One of the volcanoes in Indonesia, but not this trap, because we have in Indonesia more than 80 active volcano, and one of the active volcanoes is near our Bandung site. Okay, thank you for all the participants. Thank you for coming. Enjoy stay in Bandung. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Basuki Sohandiman. Hadirin, selanjutnya adalah penampilan paduan suara mahasiswa ITB yang akan membawakan lagu Janger, lagu daerah Bali, dan Sik Sik Si Batu Manikam, lagu daerah Sumatera Utara. Marilah kita saksikan paduan suara mahasiswa ITB. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and now we would like to present a performance by ITB Student Choir, Sing Janger, song from Bali, and Sik Sik Si Batu Manikam from North Sumatra. Please welcome ITB Student Choir.
Sia-sio, ingin menjangeran di jabat
Hadirin yang kami hormati, selanjutnya adalah penyampaian sambutan oleh APAN Board Chairman Profesor D.Y. Kim. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, now we would kindly invite APAN Board Chairman to deliver the welcoming address. Please welcome Professor D.Y. Kim.
Selamat pagi. I tried. Good morning, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. So, we are very honored and very happy to come to this your country, Indonesia. Actually, it's my shame. It's my only second time, although Korea is really here, other than to Bali. Another look at the data of Indonesia. Indonesia is the fourth largest country in the world in population. China, India, United States, and it's Indonesia. And especially for the last several years, in the 50s and 60s, we had trouble with Indonesia because we always lost to Indonesia. I mean, talking about Korea. In soccer, everything was very scary. Indonesia, especially for the last 10 to 15 years, is developing very fast. So I congratulate on that. And also culture and nature and natural resources. I'm very glad. I believe our colleagues will share my feeling being here. And also, thank you for having done so much work to host this meeting in this beautiful site, very cool site here. So, thank you again to Mr. Basuki Suaradiman and ITB for hosting this meeting. This is our 37th meeting of APAN. You realize in a few more meetings, we are going to celebrate 20th anniversary of APAN. I don't know where it's going to be, but so I'm so happy. And also my thanks goes to our keynote speakers, Dr. Ari Santoso from Ministry of Education and Culture, Professor Hubert Kaizen, UNESCO, and tomorrow Mr. Valentino Cavalli from Tirana, and Dr. Wahyu from ITB. Thank you very much. And also for special thank goes to our program chair, Dr. Jacqueline Brown, who was responsible of the whole program for several tracks for the whole weeks, and the program committee working with her. There are also our secretariat who have been working hard with the local team. And there are so many people I have to thank, but again, I had a quick peek in your slide. You said it's a power of imagination, like John Lennon said, imagine a world of love. I think that's what we are, APAN is pursuing, we are friends, we are colleagues, we love each other, we respect each other. And we started 20 years ago as a community of NREN, our owners, and mostly we are maybe technical people, but by now I think we have to expand our user community. By user, I mean not just network engineers like most of us, but real end users, which means one good example is medical people. Doctors, they are users. We provide infrastructure technology, and they do remote surgery, and so that we provide infrastructure for this real end users, so that they can do remote surgery, or they can dance on this, or we used to have also experts from climate area. So I think that's one of the agenda that we have to exert more efforts to benefit the community in Asia Pacific region. So with that, I thank you everybody, and I also invite you to join this place while you are staying here, which I'm also going to do, and I'm enjoying a lot the food. Thank you very much. Enjoy the week. Thank you.
To the honor Professor Kim, please remain on the stage. Dan selanjutnya adalah pemukulan gong yang secara simbolis membuka acara APAN 37 meeting oleh Profesor D.Y. Kim dengan didampingi oleh Bapak Basuki Suhardiman. And now we would like to invite APAN Board Chairman and Chairman of APAN 37 Meeting Local Committee to beat the gong as a symbolic sign of the opening of the APAN 37 meeting. The beat of the gong will be conducted by Professor D.Y. Kim and accompanied by Mr. Basuki Suhardiman. Thank you, Profesor Kim and Mr. Basuki Suhardiman. Hadirin, sebelum kita masuk pada acara yang berikutnya, marilah kita saksikan penampilan dari unit kesenian mahasiswa Minangkabau dengan berkolaborasi dengan APRES yang akan memainkan talempong yang merupakan alat musik tradisional dari Minang. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and now we would like to present a performance of talempong, traditional musical instrument from Minang Place Canon, by ITB Student Unit of Minangkabau and APRES. kita akan masuki sesi keynote dengan pembicara utama pada sesi ini adalah Kepala Pusat Teknologi Informasi Pendidikan, Kementerian Pendidikan dan Kebudayaan Republik Indonesia, Dr. Ari Santoso, DEA, dan Direktur Regional Asia Pasifik Biro Sains UNESCO, Profesor Hubert Gizen. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the keynote speech session, and the distinguished speakers for the session are Head of ICT Center for Education, Ministry of Education and Culture Republic of Indonesia, Dr. Ari Santoso, DEA, and Regional Science Bureau Director for Asia and Pacific UNESCO, Professor Hubert Gizen. We would like to invite our distinguished speakers and Mr. Basuki Suhardiman and also Professor D.Y. Kim to come to the stage and have a seat. Baik hadirin, untuk pembicara utama yang pertama pada hari ini yaitu Kepala Pusat Teknologi Informasi Pendidikan, Kementerian Pendidikan dan Kebudayaan Republik Indonesia dengan tema National Policy for Education Content Development. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and for the first keynote speaker, we would like to invite Head of ICT Center for Education, Ministry of Education and Culture Republic of Indonesia, to deliver the keynote speech with title National Policy for Education Content Development. Please welcome Dr. Ari Santoso, DEA.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your invitation for us, for Minister of Education. We could speak in presentation in National Policy for Education Content Development, but excuse me, sorry, because by the law I must speak in Indonesia, but we have transition in English. Okay. Pertama akan kami sampaikan bahwa kami akan mepresentasikan tema dengan judul National Policy for Education Content Development dari Kementerian Pendidikan dan Kebudayaan.
Okay, first of all, we would like to present our speech, which is titled National Policy for Education Content Development from the Ministry of Education and Culture Republic of Indonesia.
Permasalahan di Indonesia tadi dikatakan, thank you for Mr. Kim, you speak for the first. Indonesia is the fourth Indonesian, the large country. Kita mempunyai penduduk 240 juta. We have 2,700,000 teachers. And we have 50,000 plus million students. And we have 293 more thousand school, formal school. We have the informal school and formal school, and we have the 240 education office in my own country, and we have more of the 17 IELTS in Indonesia. Permasalahannya adalah bahwa di Indonesia ini, karena negara kita adalah negara archipelago yang terdiri dari puluhan ribu pulau, fasilitas ICT itu sangat penting untuk pengembangan pendidikan di Indonesia, dan penduduk Indonesia tidak merata. Sebagian besar itu berpenduduk bertempat tinggal di Sumatera dan Java, hampir 90%, dan di sisi lainnya spot-spot penduduk di pulau-pulau lainnya.
The biggest problem that we have in our country, Indonesia, is that Indonesia consists of thousands of islands and separated by several seas, and most of the people are living in the most dense island, which is Sumatra and Java. The problem is how to manage an ICT development in Indonesia.
Lanjut. The vision of the national education. Visi nasional edukasi adalah menghasilkan penduduk yang brilian dan kompetitif untuk individual pada tahun 2025. Itu adalah visi dari pendidikan nasional.
The vision of the national education in Indonesia is to produce bright and competitive Indonesian individuals in the year 2025.
Langkah-langkah yang kita lakukan strategiknya adalah, lanjut Mas. Pada tahun 2005 sampai 2009 itu kita menaikkan kapasitas dan modernisasi fasilitas sekolah di seluruh Indonesia. Tahun ini 2010 sampai 2014 itu meningkatkan pelayanan pendidikan. Dan periode berikutnya adalah 2015-2020 itu adalah meningkatkan kompetitif untuk di domestik, dan 2021 sampai 2025 meningkatkan kompetensi untuk internasional.
The steps that we are going to develop in educational system in Indonesia between year 2005 until 2009, we are going to increase the capacity and modernization. And then now, currently, at 2014, we are going to strengthening our services. Next, on 2015 until 2020, our main goal is to strengthening regional competitiveness. And the next 2020 until 2025, we are going to strengthening the international competitiveness.
Nah, strategi yang kami lakukan untuk tahun 2010 sampai 2014 meningkatkan layanan. Itu kita menggunakan yang disebut e-edukasi services. Ada dua, yaitu untuk pelayanan administratif atau support, dan e-education untuk proses pendidikan.
Between the year 2010 and then 2014, our main strategies is to strengthen education services through applying ICT-based services, both administrative and learning process purposes, which is called e-education services.
Layanan ini akan sangat membutuhkan teknologi informasi komunikasi agar supaya seluruh servis kita itu bisa dilayangkan untuk seluruh tempat di Indonesia, baik di pelosok sampai di kota-kota besar sampai ke pelosok-pelosok, ke pulau-pulau kecil yang tadi.
These services needed internet and technology services because we are trying to reach each and every places which is far away and throughout Indonesia.
Pada tahun ini, akhir tahun kemarin, kami telah membuat tata kelola untuk ICT TIK untuk pendidikan di kementerian, yaitu regulasi Permen nomor 99 tahun 2013, di mana itu adalah skup pekerjaan dari Pustekom untuk memanage teknologi informasi komunikasi untuk pendidikan di seluruh Indonesia.
The scope work of Pustekom, or Center of ICT for Education, has a mandate to use ICT for education appropriately in terms on research, planning, development, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation.
Strategi kami untuk menjalankan semuanya ini, untuk konten pendidikan ini, kami berbasis teknologi informasi komunikasi, yaitu seluruh konten-konten yang ada yang dalam bentuk analog sudah kita digitalkan semua, dan kita tempatkan di salah satu server di layanan kita dan bisa di-download maupun di-upload oleh semua masyarakat yang berperan di dalam pendidikan.
All of our contents are placed in a basis data center, and it could be uploaded or downloaded by every part and every people who are needed to have this kind of services.
Lanjut. Tujuannya adalah yang pertama adalah untuk memodernisasi fasilitas pendidikan, yaitu dengan mengubah dari konsep teacher center to student center. Di sini konsep pendidikan berubah dari yang dulunya asalnya dari berasal dari guru, pusat dari guru yang sebagai pusat pembelajaran, sekarang berubah menjadi pusatnya ada student, pelajar sebagai pembelajar yang lebih aktif. Itu ada yang pertama. Yang kedua adalah kita ingin bahwa pendidikan itu semuanya adalah terbuka dan konten-kontennya bisa di-download, di-upload secara bebas sehingga bisa diakses anytime, anywhere, easily and free for all. But all the content in Indonesia.
Our goals are, the first one is to promote modern ICT-based student-centered active learning, which is how the students are going to active learner instead of the active teachers and etc. But at this moment, we are trying to make the students actively learning. And then the second one is to open local education resources, which are available anytime, anywhere, and it's easy and free, but all of the contents are still in Indonesian or bahasa.
Yang ketiga adalah kita mengubah dulu strategi konten yang dari top to down, dari pemerintah ke masyarakat. Sekarang kita menggunakan strategi dari komunitas, yaitu komunitas masyarakat yang kita training agar dia lebih berdaya, sehingga dia akan mempunyai partisipasi aktif dalam pengembangan konten, sehingga dari bottom to up. Dan yang terakhir adalah kita menggunakan semua resources itu untuk bisa di-sharing dan bisa dimanfaatkan bersama-sama untuk pendidikan menuju ke pendidikan terbuka.
The third goal is to educate a community from the basis, starting from the basic community. In the community, we are going to train them to be able to speed up with the ICT development. And then the fourth goals are to promote open education resources campaign.
Our strategy is the first, we develop the Rumah Belajar, the house of the learning. This is the situs of belajar.kemdikbud.go.id. This situs is open for all. We can access anytime, anywhere, and every person. Di sini disebut provide one stop open integrated, yang mana situs ini adalah satu layanan yang terintegrasi konten-kontennya, baik dari konten yang berbasis teks, berbasis gambar, video, suara, ataupun multimedia, ataupun animasi dan lainnya, semua terintegrasi menjadi satu kesatuan di Rumah Belajar ini.
This is the official website of kemendikbud.go.id that provides everyone an information and education for every level of study, from basic, from kindergarten or preschool to universities and society in general.
Berikutnya ini adalah situs buku sekolah elektronik. Jadi ini adalah situs untuk buku yang sudah hak ciptanya dibeli oleh pemerintah dan bisa dibagi, di-share, di-download secara free oleh masyarakat. Kita mempunyai judul sekitar 1436 judul buku, di mana ini dari tingkatan SD sampai SMK belum perguruan tinggi. Dan semua bukunya bisa diakses secara langsung pakai e-book maupun menggunakan download dan bisa dicetak ataupun disimpan di perangkat masing-masing.
Okay, this is the website, the official website for electronic school book atau buku sekolah elektronik. This website contains 1,436 books from all of the school degree since kindergarten until high school or SMK, not included university, not yet.
The site situs bsa.kemdikbud.go.id. Lanjut. This too, we developed the radio, konten berbasis suara, yaitu suara edukasi. Layanan ini sebenarnya spesial untuk siswa-siswa yang berkebutuhan khusus yang tidak bisa melihat, dan semua materinya bisa di-download dari mulai TK sampai ke perguruan tinggi.
Okay, and this one is the website of suaraedukasi.kemdikbud.go.id. This is an audio broadcast, streaming and podcast for everyone who are going to learn through voice. Especially, we designed this for students who has disabilities on looking or disabilities in seeing or blind, for the students who have special needs.
Lanjut. Kami juga mempunyai yang berbasis video. Di sini adalah TV edukasi ini. Basisnya adalah satelit, jadi bisa diakses di seluruh pelosok di Indonesia. Yang kedua adalah yang streaming maupun TV RI, TV lokal. Seluruh konten-kontennya ini sudah bisa di-download secara free dengan standar infrastruktur Indonesia yang sangat terbatas, dengan per skim itu sekitar 5 menitan.
Okay, this is the website for the TV education. So the Kemendikbud of Indonesia provide TV education on tve.kemdikbud.go.id. It is broadcast through Telkom One satellite, so it will provides in every single part in Indonesia, so it will be wide variant. And then relayed by local TV stations and TV cables, and then also we have streaming TV program, and the contents in these websites are all free.
We have more of the 8,000 video can free of download. Lanjut, Mas. Nah, strategi berikutnya adalah bagaimana kita memanfaatkan yang dulu dari top to down. Dengan adanya fasilitas semua itu, kita adalah berdayakan masyarakat, guru-guru dan lainnya, agar supaya mereka berkembang, bisa menghasilkan produk-produk pendidikan dan bisa diupload di tadi layanan tadi semua yang sudah kami sebutkan tadi itu, dan bisa di-download oleh seluruh siswa di pelosok negeri ini. Sehingga itulah yang kita sebut oleh policy Pak Menteri, resource sharing dan integrasi proses dengan memanfaatkan teknologi informasi dan komunikasi.
Okay, the approach that we are using in this strategy is bottom-up community-based, which means we are going to and are educating people from the basic, the local community, and then educate and deliver local education to them so that they could share that education, share that knowledge to other people in their surroundings.
Lanjut. Karena kita tahu bahwa konten-konten semua itu didevelop oleh komunitas, di mana komunitas itu mempunyai development dari berbagai macam standar, sehingga semua sistem yang kami kembangkan itu kita standarkan dengan menggunakan 3 prinsip, yaitu open standard, open content, dan open system.
So every content in our websites are due to the development and delivery standard. which is open standard, open content, and open file.
Open system.
And open system, sorry.
Oke, lanjut. Nah, bagaimana kita menjalankan semuanya itu? Maka kementerian membangun yaitu yang disebut data center dengan model cloud computing, di mana semua layanan itu diletakkan di sana dan bisa diupload ataupun didownload dari setiap tempat di mana masyarakat yang ingin berpartisipasi ataupun memanfaatkan layanan tersebut secara individual maupun secara komunitas bersama.
Okay, so this is our basis data center, which we built using cloud computing facilities. So it could be downloaded by every citizens and every society in every parts of Indonesia that would like to use it for individually or in a group.
Lanjut. Nah, karena kita tahu bahwa semuanya itu adalah berbasis komunitas, maka kementerian tidak hanya bekerja sama dengan hanya kita menjalankan sendiri, tetapi kita bekerja sama dengan lokal pemerintah, yaitu pemerintahan daerah. Yang kedua adalah private atau perusahaan-perusahaan swasta. Di sini kita sudah kerjasama dengan UNESCO, World Bank, maupun dengan HP, Microsoft, Intel, dan perusahaan-perusahaan yang lainnya. Itu kita kembangkan. Dan kita juga bekerja sama dengan universitas-universitas untuk pengembangan ataupun untuk mengembangkan SDM-nya, komunitas tadi itu, dan komunitas guru maupun yang lain.
So the government held so many partnership approach with every single parts, with every local government, and then with private companies such as Intel, UNESCO, HP, Microsoft, and etc. And then also with the universities, and last but not least with teacher communities, and etc.
Lanjut. Langsung aja. Nah, ini adalah Education Network Architecture for Education. Jadi ini adalah arsitektur network kita yang sudah jalan. Jadi ini adalah sudah jalan sejak tahun akhir 2013 kita jalankan. Yaitu di sini adalah data center kita di kementerian. Yang kedua adalah di Ciputat. Dua-duanya ini adalah sudah cloud computing. Karena kita tahu bahwa arsitektur network di Indonesia itu tersentralized, maka kita menyambungkan dengan IDC Duren 3 dan semuanya ini sudah tersambung secara fiber optik yang dipasang sendiri oleh kementerian.
So the education network architecture in Kemendikbud are still in Jakarta, which is in Senayan, and then Pustekom in Ciputat. But the center is currently in IDC Duren 3. All of those networking are based on cloud computing.
Berikutnya adalah karena kita tahu bahwa posisi semua ini di Jakarta, dan ini agak riskan karena di Jakarta ini adalah termasuk daerah yang rawan bencana, maka kita kembangkan satu data center di Surabaya sebagai DRC. Di sini Disaster Recovery Center kita mengembangkan data sini, dan ini semua layanan ini adalah sudah menggunakan teknologi cloud computing.
Because of Jakarta as the capital city of Indonesia is a risk city, which means that it affects so many disasters nowadays, especially natural disaster. So we built the redundancy data center in Surabaya for the backup of the data center in Jakarta, and all of those are still based in cloud computing.
Nah, berikutnya adalah bagaimana kita kembangkan itu layanan ke masyarakat, maka bisa masyarakat individual bisa akses direct melalui IDC sini karena ada provider-provider yang ada di sini melalui lokal. Adapun lainnya adalah bisa melalui ke internet, dan untuk perguruan tinggi itu koneksinya bisa di sini dan bisa di sini, dan itu adalah yang inherent koneksinya melalui di Senayan.
Yeah, so the connections of the society could just download things from IDC Duren 3, but for the universities, they will sometimes cut the connection from Kemdikbud in Senayan.
Our target is this year we must connect it 100,000 school, and the next year we must all of school is connected by education network architecture of our education. This is all our facility special for education is connected by university facility. Thank you very much for your attention.
Terima kasih Bapak Adi Santoso. Dan hadirin yang kami hormati, untuk pembicara utama yang berikutnya pada hari ini yaitu Direktur Regional Asia Pasifik Biro Sains UNESCO, Profesor Hubert Kitchen, dengan tema Beyond 2015, The Role of Science, Technology and Innovation is Shaping the Future We Want for All. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and for the second keynote speaker, we would kindly invite Regional Science Bureau Director for Asia Pacific UNESCO to deliver his keynote speech with title Beyond 2015, The Role of Science, Technology and Innovation in Shaping the Future We Want for All. Please welcome Professor Hubert Kitchen.
A very good morning to all of you, or as we say in Indonesia, selamat pagi dan assalamualaikum. Don't worry, I won't give the whole speech in Bahasa Indonesia. I'll speak in English. As you can see, being tall is not always handy. In fact, in my job, it is a big handicap. If you work for UNESCO, you travel a lot, and you know the small seats in planes, and especially if you travel long distance. Fortunately, I came by car only from Jakarta. And then you have to manage the distance. You speak a lot, you give a lot of presentations, you have to manage the distance to the mic. But we will manage. This thing will hold together. Good. So, I believe the keynote speech should share with the audience the bigger picture. The bigger picture within which your discussions take place. And as you can see from the title, can we go back to the title? Or I can do that, wait. I can do that myself. As you can see from the title, I want to talk about the bigger picture being the international development agenda. As you know, we are currently in the period of the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals. I'm sure each and every time you have to write a proposal to attract funding, you have to relate your activities to the Millennium Development Goals, and we have all been doing that over the past 13 years, and for the coming 2 years we will continue to do that. But as the MDGs come to a close by the end of 2015, the United Nations has already started discussions about what's next, what will be after 2015, what are the issues to be tackled. In my title, I have basically used the title of the outcome document of the Rio +20 summit, which was held a year and a half ago in Rio de Janeiro. And the document, the title is Realizing the Future We Want for All. So, in the title, Beyond 2015, I will share with you some of the concerns of the big questions of the 21st century, how to address them, and how we can come to a transition towards true sustainability. We have been talking about sustainable development a lot. We have definitions of it. We even seem to understand what it means, but we are far away from being sustainable. So I think that is really the big issue that needs to be addressed in the upcoming agenda. So the bigger picture. What is the bigger picture? If you capture the big challenge, the big problem is really that we live in a world that is alarmingly out of balance. And this relates to two imbalances. The first one is between people and planet Earth, and that is reflected in that whole concept of sustainable development. But the other imbalance that we don't hear so much of is the imbalance between people, between the haves and the not-haves. Let me start with that one first, to illustrate that with a few figures. If you look at it, and I think the photo already illustrates it, it is a photo in Rio. On the right-hand side, the haves, and on the left-hand side, the not-haves. If you take the 50% of the poorest segment in society globally, they own only 1% of global wealth. However, the top 1% of richest people, they possess some 40% of global assets. So that is the divide between the unbalance between people. Also, if you look at women only earn 10% of global income. And so also there is a gender divide. Then the divide and the imbalance is also between access to services. In fact, modern medicine has answers to many diseases, yet millions of people die every year of curable disease. And then in the field of food security and hunger, it's really sad to see that many developed nations produce too much food. In the European Union, we destroy food every year, tons of food. Yet there is close to 1 billion people suffering chronically from hunger. In fact, that is the MDG 1 on hunger and poverty, where factually, if you take the starting point of the year 2000, we have gone backwards. We have not achieved the 50% reduction promise, no, we have gone backwards. It has become worse. Population growth has overtaken any gains that were made. Then, so that's the imbalance between people, and that needs to be addressed as part of the whole concept of sustainable development. But then we're also looking at the other imbalance, the imbalance between people and planet. And we all know what I'm talking about. I just will quickly illustrate it. Of course, the whole issue of climate change and the sharp increase of carbon dioxide levels that is accompanied with a rising in temperature. I also would like to refer to nitrogen. Since mid-last century, we have started massively to fix nitrogen from the atmosphere and turn it into fertilizer to boost our crop production and agricultural output, and that has been very successful to an extent that today we fix more nitrogen from the atmosphere than nature does. And of course that has consequences, because what we are doing is we turn a stable chemical compound, N2, nitrogen gas, into a reactive into a reactive compound, basically ammonia, that creates all kinds of changes in ecosystems like algal blooms, water hyacinth in the tropics. It causes all kinds of chain reactions and effects in ecosystems, including biodiversity loss. So that is really of big concern. You see here the flux of nitrogen to the coastal zone, an enormous increase in the concentration of nitrogen in the coastal environment. And phosphorus is not a limiting nutrient in the marine environment. Nitrogen is, so that means that with nitrogen you see enormous algal blooms happening. And that has ecological effects and also effects on biodiversity. We are also concerned about the sharp losses in the forest coverage. In Indonesia, that is of big concern, and there is a particular program called RED Plus to preserve forests and to reverse the rate of loss of forest coverage. We all know about biodiversity and the rate of loss of species extinction that is increasing year by year. That's another concern, where the imbalance between people and planet is not in place. Here a picture of the use of water. I believe that in a few years' time, within 10 years, water will become a defining issue in the international agenda. You may remember that when the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon took up office as a Secretary General in his first term, he raised the issue of climate change, and he said climate change is the defining issue of our time. I would make the prediction here that in 8 to 10 years' time we will all recognize that water is the defining issue of our time. And you see here the very sharp increase in the uses of water. The big consumer is agriculture. 70% of all the water that we use is for the production of our food. Now if you think of it, by the year 2050 we will be with 9 billion people that have a different diet. Those who come out of poverty eat more meat, that takes much more water to produce. So we need 70% more food production globally by 2050, and we need more than twice the water that is consumed today to produce that food. Now, that water, ladies and gentlemen, is not easily available, and what we will see is probably wars over water, and that's something we need to avoid. We have other problems where the people-planet balance is clearly a problem. We have massive pollution. While in some countries we're very careful in treating whatever we produce in terms of effluents and pollution, in many countries, in most countries actually, waste is just flowing into the environment. Let me take an example. If you take all the wastewater globally together, so our sewage and effluents from industries, then only less than 20% of that wastewater receives some kind of treatment. I'm not saying the perfect treatment to the pure effluent, some kind of treatment. That means 80% of all effluents go into our rivers, lakes, and the coastal environment, polluting massively our water systems. Of much concern in terms of pollution is also agriculture again. If you take agriculture and the bio-industry together, you're looking at the most polluting sector of all productive sectors. And if that is bad news, I have worse news for you. Much of that pollution is diffuse. So you can't simply collect it and treat it. The pesticides, the fertilizer is spread on the land, and since that moment, you cannot control it anymore. That, ladies and gentlemen, is not sustainable. That means we need to revisit the way we produce our food. Natural disasters, this region is called a supermarket of disasters. We have all types here. And just open the newspaper of today and of yesterday, and you find a number of reports on disasters that happened. Flooding is the issue in this season here in Indonesia. Just yesterday evening I came from Jakarta. Had a hard time getting out of the city because of the many floods. And the frequency and intensity of disaster is sharply increasing, and that is worrisome. Partly that is due to climate change, which has its impact on the hydrological cycle, so you see more extreme events and of a bigger impact. In the whole discussion about sustainability and the balance between people and planet, we always forget the largest part of the surface of this planet, the oceans. Why don't we think about oceans? The oceans are our life support system. Without oceans, we can't survive. And yet, we are polluting them, we're overfishing them. Climate change and the carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere are triggering acidification. There has been monitoring over decades that shows that the oceans are acidifying, which has effects on coral reefs, which has effect on ecosystems in oceans, species extinction. So there is a lot going on in the oceans. There was a famous statement by Professor Rogers in the Rio+20 event. He said there will never be the future we want for all without the oceans we need. And I think that is a very true statement. Yeah, and then the people are a very important factor in that equation in sustainable development. If you take the population curve over a longer period, it's taken over 10,000 years, you see an explosion in the last 200 years. It's really interesting if you see just 200 years ago there were only 1 billion people on this planet. We're more than 7 billion today. If you would take that cutoff point of 200 years ago, and you would measure the surface of the graph on the right-hand side of that and the surface area of the graph on the left-hand side of that cutoff point 200 years ago, you will find out that the surface area of these two parts are the same. What that means is that all the people that live today and have lived in the last 200 years ago is the same in number as all the people together that have lived since human existence. And it is indeed, if you look back over the last 200 years, that we have seen a dramatic change in the systems of planet Earth. And here this table shows it. If you just look at the last column, how our productivity and activity and resource use has increased. Our population by 7 times, our global GDP by 400 times. Per capita, still 65 times. Primary energy use, 45 times more than 200 years ago. Carbon dioxide emission, 20 times more. Mobility, 1,000 times more. Urbanization rate, 25 times higher. Well, this is of course not sustainable, just in a period of 2 years. So, you have all heard about the concept of ecological footprint. Now, if you look at where we are today, that's in the middle of the graph, we are using today the renewable resources of 1.5 planet Earth. Well, the last time I checked, there is only one, so we are using more than the planet itself can renew. That in itself is not sustainable. If we extrapolate the business as usual scenario, we will soon need 3 planets by the year 2050. We need to go back to 1 planet. That's the whole challenge of sustainable development. That's the whole issue of balancing people and planet. And that's a big challenge, and in some countries more than in others. If you would assume that today all people in this world would consume, as the average citizen in the United States, we would already today need 5 planets Earth. In the UK, we would need 3.5 planet Earth. But even in a developing country like Argentina, the development model is not sustainable. And if all people would consume like an average Argentinian, we would still need 1.7 planet Earth. China today is still in balance. It's a large country, it has a lot of renewable resource, it also has a lot of people, but it is exactly 1 today. And with the economic growth that's going on at such a high rate, we know that by tomorrow it won't be 1 anymore. So that picture gives you an indication as to the scope of this challenge that we are looking at, and really the conclusion is the Earth is in turmoil. With a population of 9 billion in 2050, we will have to face the music. We will have to make a transition in our economy. And you see at the same time, it's not only the number of people, but hopefully by 2050, we will also have left behind the whole issue of poverty. We will have managed by 2050 a complete eradication, at least of extreme cases of poverty. But that means that these people who come out of poverty start consuming differently and will, for instance, need more water for their diet and will produce more waste. We also see that much of the oil reserves that were built up actually since the start of photosynthesis, some 2.7 billion years ago, they are being burned in just a few hundred years. So therefore, ladies and gentlemen, I think that we're in a defining moment in time. This event takes place in that defining moment of time where we have the coming 2 years to think about what's next after the MDGs. So this transition from the Millennium Development Goals to the post-2015 agenda is in fact a big opportunity that is presented to us, and we need to take it and we need to use it. Everyone makes their own list of key challenges that need to be addressed in that new agenda. One thing is clear: the new agenda needs to be much more comprehensive than the current. The MDGs has been a very effective agenda. It has been an agenda focused on poverty eradication and associated problems. And what I mean with associated problems is problems of health, disease, of hunger, food production. But it has not looked at the bigger picture. And I promised that I would share with you the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is that we need to address both imbalances. The imbalance between people and planet, and the imbalance between people. So issues of poverty, health, food security, yes, but in the context of sustainable development. So in that sense, the new agenda will need to be very different. It needs to be much more ambitious. It needs to be much more comprehensive. That makes it also much more complex. And as I said, everyone will make their own list of key challenges. I like the figure 10. If it goes beyond 10, I can't remember anymore. So I just reduced the number to 10. And if you look at that list, then you can debate about it. Is this missing, or is that missing, or should we add such, or can we merge these two? If you look at that list of 10 key challenges of the 21st century, it's interesting. I've indicated in different colors, in white and in yellow. It's interesting to see that those indicated in white are typical developing country problems. And we in the North tend to think that all the problems are typical developing country. Not at all. Look at those in yellow. Each of those key challenges in yellow are common problems for the North and the South. So that means the bulk of key challenges of this century are common problems that we have to face, all of us, and that calls for collaboration. Also, if you look at the scope of each of these challenges, they all take energy. We all know it. We need to transit and have a transformational shift towards renewable energy. We all know it. We talk about it every day. Yet yesterday I stepped into my car and I tell you, honestly, it's not running on renewable energy. So we live our lives the way we live and with the technologies given to us. But we have a few decades to make that transition, and it will have to happen. But that is a question that's too big to handle for any single country. However big and however strong its economy, any single country alone will not be successful in addressing any of these key challenges. That calls for collaboration. That's also where your discussions on connectivity come in. We need strong partnerships. We need to build collaborative platforms. We need to be in touch, connectivity. We need to mobilize the power of connectivity. Now, again, I promised you the big picture, but let me start with the specific picture. Maybe that, if I had two photos, I want to explain why the big picture. We oftentimes look at a specific picture, and what you see here is, well, I can see it, it's a revolver. So it's a symbol of violence, of aggression, of killing. So if that's the conclusion you take from the picture, you may go home with the wrong message, and you will act maybe in the wrong direction. That's why it is so important to get the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is this. Actually, this is a monument. It's a monument in front of the United Nations building in New York. So this is a gun with a knot at the end. It's a monument against violence. The message is exactly the opposite. It was produced by a Swedish artist, a good friend of John Lennon, and he produced that after his killing. And he said, we need to get rid of guns, we need a peaceful society. So it's a monument for peace. So this is really the message. Let's always look at the bigger picture, and only then at the specific picture, because that's where we feel comfortable, that's where we are experts, That's where we are mobilizing our energy. But in order to decide in which direction we move that energy, you need to keep up the bigger picture. Now the bigger picture on the development agenda is the following. If you compare the MDGs with the new agenda as it should be designed, you come to some conclusions. As I said already, it's on subject, the MDGs on poverty plus, but the new agenda needs to consider to address poverty, eradication, sustainable development, and the big question of peace and security. And not one by one or in parallel or each after the other. Unfortunately, we can't do that. There is no time. We have to address these three big agendas at the same time. And the other reason why we need to do that at the same time is because these three are intimately interrelated. And taking one forward without the other will be ineffective. In fact, if we don't address issues of climate change, we will lose all gains we have made under the MDGs on poverty. So we need to take these agendas forward together. The MDG agenda was a top-down agenda. It was drafted in Washington, in New York, over the weekend is a big word, but in a few weeks it was drafted. This new agenda is being designed for a global consultative process. More than 100 countries have been involved. Consultations where open interaction have been held and are continuing. The MDGs were designed as an agenda for developing countries, and as I explained earlier, the new agenda needs to be an agenda for all. It needs to be an agenda for horizontal cooperation. The MDGs were a North helps South agenda, an ODG-driven agenda. Now it's time to work together horizontally. So that is a whole different agenda setting for the new post-2015, and as I mentioned, we need to address these three big agendas together. The one on towards sustainable development and a transition towards a green economy, the unfinished business of the Millennium Development Goals on poverty eradication and associated problems, and the big agenda on peace and security. Now then the question is, what is the role of science, technology and innovation? Let me share with you some thoughts on the past, the present and the future. What role has science and technology played in the past? Well, let me refer to the various technological revolutions. Of course, the Industrial Revolution, which was triggered late 17th century by the invention of the steam engine, has been very important for the society that we know today. It has brought us later electricity, mechanization in factories, so hard labor could be abandoned, mass production of products. So it brought us an enormous economic prosperity and welfare for many. Then the medical revolution in the second half of the 19th century is a big revolution as well. Remember, Louis Pasteur was the first one who proved that there is microbial life, because that concept was contested in those days. So spontaneous generation was eradicated. It was proven there is microbes and they live and they grow. With that understanding, of course, we could understand many diseases, and only then could also new medicines be developed. It took until, I believe, 1937 until Alexander Fleming produced the first antibiotics. But since then, I mean, if you look at it, an enormous industry has developed. The pharmaceutical industry is one of the biggest industries in the world. So very important, the medical revolution. Then I already referred earlier to the Green Revolution. Well, what is the Green Revolution? That came from the realization in the 50s and the 60s of the last century that with the traditional food production systems we had in place, we were running against a ceiling of the capacity globally of food production. And we would be facing big cases of hunger in big pockets in the world. So we needed to find a way to boost the food production and go through that ceiling. The only way was by adding nitrogen, fertilizer to plants. So that was done. We've seen the development of fertilizer plants all over the world. Each and every country has some of them. And that's applied now. And as I showed, we add more reactive nitrogen to the land now, taken from fertilizer, than nature does. Nature does that via very specialized bacteria. There are only very few species that can do that. For instance, rhizobium. They live in the root systems of certain plants, and they capture this nitrogen and convert it into nitrogen that is available for the plant. So the green revolution, pesticides came up, crop improvement measures, and that has had its result. We went through that ceiling and are now feeding 7 billion people. That still some 1 billion people are hungry. It's not because we don't produce enough food. There is just an inefficient trade and distribution system. The mobility revolution, well, you see here a bicycle from 1790, and now we are traveling in big Boeings and traveling around the world. And that has led to an increase in our mobility by more than a factor 1,000 in the last 200 years. Well, the present, we're in the midst of an ICT revolution. And I like this sentence of Tom Forrester, who's a science journalist. Just read it for yourself, but he compares the speed of development in ICT and compares it to other sectors like the automobile industry and the planes. And if these sectors would have developed at the same speed, you could indeed drive a Rolls-Royce and buy it for $2.7, and it would run for 3 million miles on 1 gallon of gas. So if you would take the same speed of development that we have witnessed in the past few decades in ICT. I come back to that speed of development in ICT a bit later. Well, what's in it for the future? We don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. But of course, there is a number of areas that have held a big promise for the last years. Biotechnology, is that the new revolution? Is it nanotechnology? Is it high-speed computing or combinations of these? We will need to see what's coming up. What is coming as the next revolution, we don't know. But what we need as the next revolution, we know. That's a sustainable development revolution. Now, if you look back to these science-based revolutions of the past, what can we learn from there? How has science and technology been utilized, and what kind of effects has it had? Well, of course, we must conclude that the Industrial Revolution and all the other revolutions have been very useful. They brought enormous economic growth and progress, and also prosperity and wealth for many. But many others were excluded. And these people are now addressed under the MDGs. And that is, of course, the imbalance between people that we have created. And then also, if you look at the benefits, they came at a huge cost. A cost that we still are not willing to absorb in our economies. The cost of environmental damage, the cost of resources that we take from the planet, the cost of managing cycles in a renewable fashion and in a balanced fashion. And if you would start calculating what these costs are and absorb them in our economy, we would have a whole different economy. So what we need, as I said, is really the next revolution to be a sustainable development revolution. What I mean to say with that is a call to all the scientists, engineers, and innovators of the world to come together and put your knowledge, expertise, and technologies to work in favor of that transformational shift towards sustainable development. But for that to happen, we all have to live with a political environment in our countries, in regions, globally. And the position of science and technology typically is not the best in any country. The OECD recommends, for instance, that 3% of the national income of the GDP is spent on R&D. While in this whole world, there is only 4 countries that meet that target. The science and technology minister is mostly, in most countries, the most junior minister, the most unimportant minister in the cabinet. So we need to raise and uplift the position of science and technology on the national and also on the international agenda. In the United Nations, we have so many agencies, about 30 and more. And where do you find science and technology? You have to look hard. Then you find UNESCO and discover the S of UNESCO is science, and that's it. So in UN meetings, if I attend big meetings of the UN in New York or elsewhere in Geneva, it's hard to bring up the issue of science and technology. So we need to work on that. We need to also ensure a much more forward-looking approach, because if we want to learn from the past, then it tells us that oftentimes we got it wrong, or at best, we got it only partially right. Yes, there were benefits, but there were so many externalities that needs to be minimized. So we need to position science and technology to support the new agenda, but we need to manage foresight. We need to maximize benefits and minimize externalities. There is no guarantee, because here we meet one of our big weaknesses. It's probably in our genes. We have very little capacity for foresight. As a person, we can relate to our children, and when we grow older, we can relate to their children. But to go beyond that, psychologically, is very difficult for us. In sustainable development, we have to think hundreds of years down the road. That's something we simply are not able to do. But we have to train ourselves to get better in doing that. Now, is science a priority? I already mentioned it. The big challenge to get it on the political agenda, the R&D investments. Let's just look at these figures. First of all, if I take the Millennium Development Goals, if you scan the document and you, by the size of the words that are here from the document, you see the bigger the size, the more often that word was mentioned in the document. Now I challenge you, where is science? It's not there. It's not that it wasn't mentioned at all, maybe in one page, in one word it came, science and technology, but it's not found. The expenditure on R&D, this global map shows the investments in country. And the top level is light yellow, it's more than 2%, not enough still, according to the OECD, which recommends 3% as a minimum. In the whole world, as I said, you see only 4 countries meet that target. In Indonesia, I don't know the percent, but it is a percent behind the comma. Behind the comma. OECD recommends 3%. And that is a percent, in this case, of a much lower GDP. So it's much less money. Now, UNESCO works on science in the United Nations system, the S of UNESCO, and we hope that that will be a big S. The importance of science to underpin this new agenda, the post-2015 agenda, is extremely important. But to lobby that importance into that agenda is not easy. In UNESCO, we have developed a number of important programs. We have, of course, as a multi-country setting, as the United Nations, we work with intergovernmental programs. There is the IHB program, for instance, the International Hydrology Program, the IOC, the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Committee, the Man and Biosphere Program. So these are all international collaborative programs. What I would comment in this audience is that I would like to discuss with you further, how can we use connectivity to bring these global, regional and national networks of IHB, MAP and etc. together and work more efficiently and interchange databases and come up with joint research programs and projects. There's a whole list of other areas where UNESCO works, a lot of work on university industry interactions, science parks, science education, also in basic education is a very important approach. We work with university networks and academic networks. We have a program on chairs, professorial chairs in university to give more visibility and attention to a specific area of work. And of course, we also work on connectivity, and in this region we have worked on establishing Connect Asia to showcase the power of connectivity. It connects the national networks, for instance, Inherent, Myran and others into regional connectivity and platform. By the way, we are piloting the application of this network in all kinds of different areas. It's not only in research, cooperation, or in education, mostly in higher education, but also, for instance, we organized events in cultural collaboration, showcasing cultural diversity. UNESCO's role is more than science, and the S is only one letter in the acronym. And of course, the E stands for education. So in the context of the new agenda and in the context of sustainable development, the UNESCO mandates our position to educate for a sustainable future, to mobilize science and technology for sustainable development, to mobilize culture for development, and we held last November a global conference in Bali, hosted by the Indonesian government, on the subject culture, the World Cultural Forum, it was Culture for Development. And we contribute to building knowledge societies. Well, let me come back in the last part of my presentation to these 10 global challenges. While I've been talking, they haven't gone away, they're still there. It's a long list. And the risk of the new agenda in trying to address each one of them individually is big. And that you get lobbies of stakeholder groups around one specific objective is, of course, also there. We need to understand that these key challenges of this century are all interconnected. If you start analyzing them, each one relates to the other and vice versa. So there are complexities that we need to deal with. These are complex challenges, each one individually, but the interaction between them makes this whole system more complex. Take, for instance, food, water, energy. Why is a farmer in rural NTT in eastern Indonesia poor? It's because he has no access to energy. Without energy, he can't irrigate. Without irrigation in that dry area, he can't grow crops to an extent that he can satisfy his family's nutrition and sell enough to have some income. So it's a downward spiral, and it's triggered in a chain reaction: energy, water, food. But if you understand that, and that's where science comes in, to understand these interrelationships and analyze them better, you can use that same chain upwards. So energy provision in NTT would be strategic. Then farmers have access to water, then they can irrigate, then their crop production goes up, then they have sufficient nutrition, and they can sell to the market. And that's the same, it's just an example, it's the same for all the other challenges. But then we need to identify from that long list key ones. If they're all interrelated, then addressing one may affect others. And for one challenge, that may be more so than for others. And I have been promoting these three to be the real grand challenges. The grand challenges of the 21st century: energy, water, and food. And why is that so? And what does that mean? It is so because via water, energy, and food, if we make that transition towards, let's dream for a moment, we make a transition by 2050 to full renewable energy. Many people will say, can't be done, can be done. Can be done. If we all agree to it, it can be done. We have 35 years to do it. If we would manage to do that, we would reverse climate change. we would reduce biodiversity loss. If we change the food production system, and I will come back to that, we will have less land intensive, we will need less deforestation. So you see how addressing these will resolve others. If you have food production in a different manner that's more efficient, you use less water, that reduces pressure on water systems. So what we need is new energy, new water, and new food. Now what is that? Sounds a bit strange. That is something that comes under a vision. And that's what we need today. We're all discussing about the new agenda for the coming 15 years, but the big questions, all these 10, we won't resolve in 15 years' time. So the post-2015 agenda goes up to 2030. To make that full transition towards sustainability is possible by 2050. If scientists analyze it and convince me it should be 2070, I will settle for that. But I would say let's be ambitious, 2050. So what we need today is a vision for 2050. I call it Vision 2050. And I'm promoting this in the United Nations system because it doesn't exist. We're designing an agenda for the medium term, a new MDG agenda post-2015 for 15 years, without having the horizon. And that's what we need, a long-term vision of a sustainable world in which by mid-century, 2050, 9 billion people can live with a decent quality of life within the planet's limited resources. And that's what I mean with the power of imagination. Many people will in that discussion say it can't be done. We will never be able to make that transition. Not for energy, we will have to use oil first. There are of course interests at stake. Food production, well, how can we produce food without land? How can we abandon the bio-industry? It can all be done if we just could imagine. So we need to use that power that we all have individually and collectively even more, that innovative power of imagination, imagining a future which is balanced between people and planet. And therefore we need to mobilize science, technology and innovation and create these transformational innovations. Look at this list of areas that are speeding up so fast. And it's unbelievable. In the period that is behind us, say the last 10 years, what has happened? This APAN exists almost 20 years. 20 years ago, before that, you could not imagine something like that. That you could have video conferencing over the world, that you connect everybody, you can collaborate. So the speed of all these areas listed here is so fast that just imagine what could happen in a period of 2050 to 2030 and let even 2050. That's astronomical. So there is an exponential shift possible. I illustrate that with this graph, which I lent from a publication. And what it does is, on the right-hand side, it shows the cost of computing capacity. On the right-hand side, it takes the iPad 2. We know what it costs. What is it? $800? So that's where it is. Now you take that capacity of the iPad 2 and you go back to all the other big computers of the past. Take the IBM 7090. That was developed in the 60s, early 60s. If you would multiply that limited capacity that IBM had, which would, by the way, fill a whole room full of equipment, but it had a fraction of the capacity of the iPad 2. So you multiply it by the iPad 2 capacity, and you end up to pay, what is it? $50 billion. So you see the enormous exponential change that has happened in the ICT sector, in terms of computing capacity, in terms of cost. And that vision, that imagination, we need to keep that up in making these transformational shifts in energy. If you look back in the 70s, we had the first signs that our oil-based economy is not sustainable. But yet, still, 2014, we're still there. So in the past 25 years, we saw an emergence of climate change awareness. There are still some in the desert who don't believe it, but most are converted. And we also believe that we know where it comes from. So we need to find another way of producing our energy. So the coming 25 years, I predict a diversification of renewable energy sources. In bioenergy, it could be geothermal, it could be from biotechnology, solar, whatever. So we will see all these technologies develop. After that, I predict we will see a selection and competition, and maybe one or two will emerge as the main energy sources of renewable energy. And that will be the new energy. Which one it will be, I don't know, otherwise I would buy the stocks, but we will have to wait and see. Here again an example in the field of energy, solar energy. If you look at it, a solar panel to produce an output of one, what is it, a watt? $100 in '76, and now we are looking at a price that is a few dollars. So an enormous exponential change in the efficiencies, in the durability of the infrastructure. So that is possible. For water, we need to picture the city of the future also. New water. We have to dramatically change the way we deal with water. Some examples. We have now flooding in Jakarta because we abstract water from aquifers for drinking, and the land is subsiding, and Jakarta is basically sinking into the sea. We have to stop that. We see flooding. Because of that, we get a lot of flooding. But also, if you look at a picture of the city from the top, you see only parking lots, concrete roofs, asphalt. Where does water go when it rains? There is no space for water anymore, so it gets flooded. So what we need in the city of the future is waterscapes. Instead of landscapes, we have waterscapes, big water bodies at a distance of 1 kilometer from each other. The bottom of these lakes is engineered to regulate the infiltration to the groundwater, and that will keep up your land, it will avoid land subsidence, it provides aesthetics, it provides drainage, retention, recharge, and that's all possible. Then you can also introduce floating buildings because that space is economic space. And the right-hand side is an animation, the left-hand side is a real picture. There's a new company in the Netherlands that provides, in this case, Casco, floating houses. You can buy it as such, or you can buy it finished, or you can decorate it yourself. And that's fantastic. Imagine, we are so mobile nowadays, we take jobs in another city. If that happens, you just hire a boat. No more packing and unpacking. There you go. Efficiency. Then our waste in the cities, our personal waste. The use of the flush toilet is not sustainable. I predict in the year 2050 that will be prohibited. And of course, if you think of it, it's pretty insane what we're doing. Think of it. You flush the toilet. For what? You use crystal clear, zero coliform drinking water. This water. For what purpose? To transport excreta out of the city. That's insane. Now you have a waste that is produced principally as solid waste, excreta. And you dilute it with drinking water. Now from that moment on, you can only treat it as wastewater, which is very costly. Therefore we need these big sewer pipes that oftentimes don't lead anywhere, just to the river, not to a treatment plant. That is not sustainable. So the city of the future uses vacuum to transport that solid waste from your house to decentralized, underground, fully automated composting systems, where it is co-composted with the organic fraction of solid waste. The first generation of systems produces methane gas, biogas. The second generation, in 15 years' time, will make hydrogen gas out of this. So you get something back, energy to run your air conditioners, the vacuum system, or the heating if it is in Europe and cold. Then urine. Urine is a chemical waste. Why? Because of the medical revolution. Think of all the large portion of the female population taking birth control pills. That's very useful. I'm not from the Vatican, so use it. But these are hormones. And these hormones are poorly treated in treatment plants, and they go into the environment. Think of all the tablets, medicines that we take. Much of those medicines are highly toxic, and they have ecotoxicological chain effects in ecosystems. And there is scientific evidence that shows it. So we need to treat urine separately. There you need to collect centrally, but with small tubes, and you have a pharmaceutical industry at the end that takes out all these compounds out of the urine and puts them back in a tablet. That is economically feasible. And technologically it's already possible. So you have that high-tech toilet in your house later. Urine goes this way, and fecal matter goes that way, decentralized, and urine centralized. That's the city of the future. Now, there's one thing missing, that's food. We also need new food, and I explained why. To produce food, sufficient food for 9 billion people with today's systems is impossible. We can do it, but then we will see planet Earth change very quickly. And key limiting factors are water. Water is the prime limiting factor for food production today. It is land availability of land, and we are recovering every time land from the forest, which we also don't want. It requires too much energy, there are problems with crop disease, and we see now also that climate change is fighting back on us with extreme events of flooding and droughts, and it is impacting on our food production system. So what we will need to do is a lot of things. We need to increase crop yields. We need to reduce crop vulnerability against disease and against environmental stress. We need to reduce dependency on fertilizer and pesticides. We need to reduce water dependency. We need to produce more crop per drop. But all of that in an incremental fashion is not going to make it. We're not going to meet the equation. What we need is a transformational shift. And that transformational shift is towards new food. What is new food? Well, one example, new farming. The left-hand side, in animation again. The right-hand side, real. Now where? In Singapore. Singapore. There is no land available in Singapore. So they have a vertical system, a carousel, and it rotates, and it's a horticulture that produces vegetables, which are sold as hotcakes, and it receives water at the bottom, and it receives light at the top, and it goes around. No pesticides, fertilizer dosed in the water and recovered with the water recovery. So low in water use, low in fertilizer use. And zero emission, it doesn't produce waste. Then we have the big thing, meat, protein. We all need protein. Well, the new food is the production of that protein and the production of meat via an old technology, tissue culture. It exists for decades. We scientists use it in the laboratory. We can grow tissues from single cells, and you can get a one layer. You can have multiple layers produced and combine that, and you have real meat. And that is possible. So the idea to produce food in factories is not so far away from reality. Some will say that's science fiction. We're not going to see that. But think of it, if you can do this, you can manage these factories with full recycle of water, with full recycle of nutrients. You don't need pesticides. By the way, we have also neatly resolved in this way a big other question, an ethical question of the bioindustry, which is a big thing that we don't want to talk about, that we don't want to think about when we are enjoying our steak. So that's the future. Now you think it's far away. Well, here is a picture of the recent past. This hamburger was made from tissue culture. And it was launched just last year in September, I believe. A group in Maastricht, a university in south of the Netherlands, produced via tissue culture a hamburger, and it was subsidized and funded, this project, by Google. And they called all the media, and they had a tasting event. The result was, it's real meat, but the taste is not great. That was the verdict. And the reason was also given because this is pure cells of meat. A hamburger also has always some fatty tissue, and that is the juicy part. That's technology. That can be done, no problem, don't worry. In the year 2050, two children will be talking to each other and joking, can you believe it? My grandfather used to kill animals to eat, and they laugh, they can't believe it. This is the future, this is the state of the art. The cost was $330,000. Think again of this exponential change of technology. Think about the IBM 7030 that would have costed $50 billion. So you will laugh now and say, that's not possible. That's typically what happens a lot. The power of imagination, that's what is needed here. And we will eat these hamburgers in 2050. Now, interestingly, I came across this statement from Winston Churchill in 1931. Look at it. We shall escape the absurdity of growing a whole chicken in order to eat the breast or the wing, by growing these parts separately under a suitable medium. Wow. That's what I call vision. That's the power of imagination. 1931. Congratulations. So, this maybe helps. This is imagination. This is the city of the future. I would say, welcome to the future. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Professor Hubert Giesen. We would like to invite our keynote speakers, APAN Board Chairman and Chairman of the APAN 37 Meeting Local Committee for photo session. Thank you for all distinguished speakers. You all may go back to your previous seat. Baik hadirin, dengan demikian telah selesai acara pembukaan di APAN 37 meeting pada hari ini. Kami persilakan hadirin untuk menikmati hidangan ringan yang telah kami sediakan di sebelah barat dari ballroom. Kemudian acara akan dilanjutkan dengan sesi paralel yang akan dimulai pada pukul 11.30. Dan kami informasikan bahwa pada pukul 5.30 akan ada penampilan cyber yang bertempat di ballroom ini. Terima kasih atas perhatian hadirin. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the opening ceremony, the APAN 37 meeting, and we would like to invite for all of you for a cordial coffee break, and we will continue for parallel session at 11:30. And we would like to inform you that in 5:30 p.m. there will be cyber performance taking place in this ballroom. Thank you for your attention. Good day.